brand new day now. There we go. Episode 63. It is a brand new Stick to Hockey Live. It is Jason Martinez. It is Anthony DeMarco. It is the Flyers off season and the first round, middle of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which have been unbelievably fascinating night in and night out. But we'll talk about that momentarily. Ant, what's going on?
Not too much, man. It seems like spring is finally here. And I mean, playoffs are underway. Really good game with Toronto and Tampa last night. It looks like Toronto's maybe finally turning a corner, right?
Yeah, some gutty wins. First, they get the O'Reilly tying goal and the Riley winner the other night to take the 2-1 series lead. And then last night, again, they get it done. And the huge comeback in that game. That's just not used to seeing Tampa spit one up.
Yeah, I know but Hedman, I would imagine he's still playing hurt. Chernak, he's out. And I saw this stat. I think it was Mark Masters of TSN who said the three guys who averaged the most ice time against the Leafs last year were Hedman, Chernak, and McDonough. McDonough's not there anymore. Hedman is presumably playing injured, and obviously Chernak hasn't been available. So, I mean, it just goes to show the magnitude of those players not being at 100% for the Tampa Bay Lightning on the back end.
Yeah, and they're just not as deep as they were. And that's one thing that I think that Toronto's exposing as well. Plus, Toronto got, some really good goaltending the other night from Samsonov. A little surprised by how well he played. His playoff record, coming into this series was 1-6. So he's a huge X factor if they're going to get by Tampa and then move on to the second round, and we'll see who they face. It's some interesting series with, Jersey loses both games at home, 5-1 score in both of them. And then they go to New York and they win both. I'm going, what is going on here all of a sudden? And Lindy Ruff's teams are resilient, but geez, I didn't know if they'd be able to draw even with the Rags. I played the Rags last night thinking that would be a walk in the park, but that was not the case. And Akira Schmidt's been a huge difference.
Yeah, and I got to ask you, as someone who lives down there, is there really home ice advantage between Jersey and the Rags, like when they're going back and forth?
Probably not much. I think home ice advantage is overrated anymore to begin with, let alone when you can invade the other team's building with a commute that might even be shorter to the team you like. Well,
so, and I even realized that in Tampa last night there was a lot of Toronto fans, and I'm a wrestling fan, so Edge and Christian were in the building. Obviously, they're Toronto-based guys, so that was cool to see. And then you have the stuff going on out west, like Seattle's making it a hell of a series. It looks like Winnipeg may finally be dead in the water there. But Seattle, you know what? I picked Colorado in 5. I almost immediately regretted it, but I just didn't give them a hope in hell because of Philip Grubauer. He was the X factor to me. Well, not so much the X factor, but he was kind of like a really big factor in terms of if Seattle was going to be able to keep up with Colorado. But he's done better than expected, especially after the 2 brutal years he's had to start his career in Seattle.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, is if you recall the last week's episode, I had Seattle as a play in game 1. I just thought that's a team, with playing with house money, I think is always an interesting thing. You're playing against the Cup champs. And then the Edmonton LA series, this is going 7. I don't see how any chance that it's not. What a series that has been as well. Gutty effort. Kane the other night on one leg gets the game tied. He was an animal at the end of the game, even on that one leg. And then Edmonton ends up winning it in overtime. That was a fantastic game. And I can't wait for game 5 tonight.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a hell of a game. And do you think Boston closes it out?
I tend to think they do tonight. Okay. To me, it looks like they've overwhelmed Florida just with all that. They're not even at full strength, and they're still just overwhelming. So I think that Boston closes out tonight, and I think Carolina closes out tonight.
Yeah, I actually picked the Islanders to win that, but Sorokin hasn't been Ilya Sorokin, and that's who I thought was going to be the biggest X factor in that series.
Me too. That's something that I said. I said that's a wild card team that can upset a division winner because the goaltending for the Islanders I thought was stronger than Carolina. It hasn't played out that way. Yeah, it's been awesome, man. It's been a lot of fun. First round, these 2 weeks, forget about it. Is there a better 2 weeks? And if you're a hockey fan, there's no better 2 weeks in sports than the first round of the playoffs. I love it.
Yeah, I know. And I'm really curious to see who gets through. Like, because, I was talking to someone about the West yesterday, and I picked the low hanging fruit. I took Edmonton to come out of the West, but it's really a crapshoot. Like, you save for, like I said, save for Winnipeg and maybe Seattle. But now, even look at the way Seattle's playing, but maybe not in terms of a cup contender. There's like 5 or 6 teams that are all in the same tier, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, I
And
agree.
and to be honest, I thought I was picking whoever came out of the Edmonton LA series to go to the cup final. I really like both those teams. And Tom McClellan's done a hell of a job doing his best to neutralize McDavid. Obviously, Dreisaitl's been the standout guy in that series, but they've really tried to neutralize McDavid's speed through the neutral zone. And
Yep.
obviously, obviously, McClellan knows McDavid better than anyone. He was his first coach in the NHL, but I
Mhm.
think that LA deserves a lot of love for what they're doing right now, and a hell of a pickup by Rob Blake for Vladislav Gavrikov. He's done really well out there.
Yeah, and, you can put Kopitar out there to mitigate what McDavid does, especially in the neutral zone, because that's where he does all his damage getting through the neutral zone and off the rush. But the thing is too is that you look at a team like Minnesota, and if they're going to get the goaltending from Gustafson, then they're going to be a team that's going to have to be reckoned with as well there. So it's going to be so interesting to see how these kind of play out and how they move on, and we'll see where it all goes. And some great hockey. I mean, if Minnesota can get by Dallas, and that's no, and say Seattle beats the Avs, then all of a sudden you got Minnesota versus Seattle, and yeah, I like Minnesota there to get to a conference final and see if it's, whether it's Vegas, Edmonton, or LA. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I
Um,
really I like Minnesota, and I took Dallas, and I took a lot of series in seven, especially out west, just because it was a coin flip. I think the only series out west I didn't take in seven was Colorado Seattle,
yeah,
because it really was a coin flip in a lot of series for me, and I really like Minnesota too, but I think that Dallas maybe is a bit deeper in every position. Obviously, they have that star power and Kirill Kaprizov, but Dallas is no slouch either. You have Rupe Hintz, you have
Robertson.
Robertson, that's the kid. And I just think they're overall deeper down the middle, where with guys like Hintz, you have that young kid, Wyatt Johnson. I think you have Seguin playing on the wing right now, Pavelski playing on the wing right now, who could both play center in a pinch. So I just think that Dallas was overall a bit deeper. And I was going to say they have the edge in goaltending, but that guy Gustafson is looking like a hell of a player right now.
Yeah, he's had a great year. I don't know if he's can sustain it. I don't know, but we'll see on that. Let's get to the Flyers' latest news and notes. I know there's been a lot going on, and we talked last week about some initial candidates and some interviews that had taken place or were going to take place that you were reporting on in the fourthperiod.com. But let's get to the latest news. We're a week later now. We're a couple weeks now removed from the regular season. I guess we're 12 days removed from the regular season at this point, and U18s are going on right now, so there's probably some attention there. But what's the latest on candidates for the president of hockey operations role from Anthony DeMarco of the fourthperiod.com?
Well, I put out a tweet this morning that I believed that Dave Poulin would be getting an interview either today or tomorrow, and I have since confirmed. I'm pretty sure to say rather that he was interviewed at some point this morning. I don't know how serious of a contender Dave Poulin will be. I've heard through the grapevine that it's been more interest expressed on his part as opposed to Comcast part. I know that he's really kind of lobbied for himself, and it could be a courtesy interview. But look, Dave Poulin's a very well-respected guy in the market, obviously around the league as well, and in
Yeah.
that organization. So maybe he comes in there and wows them. And we know Scott Mellenby interviewed, I believe it was Friday or Thursday. I think that there's a lot of respect for Scott Mellenby. I've heard that there is a lot of pushing from the scouting department for Scott Mellenby to maybe get that job. And then we know that Doug Wilson is in the mix in some capacity. That one, I'm not sure if it's already happened or it's going to happen, but I know that Doug Wilson's name was thrown out there as well. And as I said, early last week, I believe, or late the week the previous, I'm all getting mixed up with my days right now. I think Hammy Granado, in addition to Emily Costongue, was getting some consideration as well. And, it's going to be interesting because I'm led to believe that later on in the week, they'll probably be starting their second round of interviews. And, they're really kind of casting a blank carpet over this, or a wide net rather over this, to really diversify their candidate list and really look high and wide for the right person. And to this point, I don't think anyone in hockey ops has been briefed on anything. Like, I don't even think like the guy leading hockey ops and Danny Briere knows anything right now as to what is going on. So Comcast has kept it tight to the vest, but that's the latest I've heard.
Okay, so let's first of all, no Shiro is that a non-starter at this point? He probably wants to be more of a general manager than a president of hockey ops.
Yeah, like from the beginning, it seemed like everything ran through Ray Shiro. He was their guy, and they were almost kind of taken aback that he really wasn't interested from the onset. And I said this I think 2 weeks ago, but I reached out to someone in Minnesota, and they wouldn't confirm or deny if the Flyers had reached out. So that leads me to believe that the Flyers did reach out for permission to talk to Ray Shiro. But it seems like he wants his hand on the wheel in day-to-day hockey ops. And I think that he'll probably get it based on what's going on in New Jersey. A lot of his fingerprints are on that team. And you look at maybe an opening in Calgary, maybe he gets some consideration there, although it seems like the internal candidate, Craig Conroy, maybe has the inside track right now. But yeah, it seems like Ray Shiro early on in this process maybe told them that he wasn't interested. And I think that it was his job if he wanted it. But I think what we're kind of learning here is that this is not a traditional president of hockey ops hire. I think it's going to be a lot of working closely with Val Camillo. I think it's going to be a lot on marketing the brand, focusing a lot on the salary cap. They really want to fix the salary cap and run this thing like a good business, and kind of intertwine it with the business side of it, because we have heard rumblings that there was a fractured relationship between the hockey and the business side over the last several years. And I also have gotten the sense that this person is not going to be like Danny Briere's boss. I think
It's a different hierarchy.
Yeah, it's almost as if Danny Briere, the president, and Val Camillo will almost be like on an even playing field, where you won't have the president be able to fire Danny or vice versa, or Val get in there. It really feels like, as opposed to a president being over Danny Briere, we're going to have both of them on an equal footing. And this isn't for sure. This is kind of like me connecting dots and some things that I've heard, but it feels like they're really splitting the responsibilities of running the hockey operations department evenly in two. And Danny Briere will be concentrating completely on hockey personnel and roster
and he would
management.
report to Dan Hilferty.
Exactly. Like Dan Hilferty is going to stay involved, to have a pulse on anything, like if a change is needed to be made. But it really seems like, and again, can't say this 100% certainty, but just what I've been hearing, it seems like they really want to prioritize properly distributing responsibilities and not overloading anyone. Because I think one thing with Chuck Fletcher, for all the wrong that he did, I think there was a belief that he was overloaded and that he just had far too much on his plate as the president of hockey ops and the general manager, dealing directly with Dave Scott, the only one who dealt with Dave Scott directly from the hockey operations, which I was told last night. So, I mean, I think that they're really concentrating on not overloading any which position, while also making it seem like, okay, this isn't going to be a hierarchy where there's one president who deals with Dan Hilferty. It feels like it's going to be like Val Camillo from the business side, the president of hockey ops to kind of be the buffer between everything, and then Danny Briere overseeing the hockey side.
So it's not a traditional stacked hierarchy where you have owner, president, GM, assistant GM. It's more a plateau. Owner, three across, and they're all on equal footing, and they don't report to each other. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a different way to do it. And I know that, there's been reporting that Billy King and his firm are involved, and Billy's a really smart guy. I worked with him at WIP. I was manager there at the time, and he's a really smart guy, and he's not a guy that goes, well, that's the way it's been done, so that's the way it should be done. So his firm could have some influence in that as well. Let's talk about Brad Treliving, because I brought him up last week, and you and I talked about him briefly. He's out of Calgary. Is he a guy that's ready to graduate to the role of a president? because I did some digging on Brad Treliving, and from everybody I've talked to, he is an incredibly well respected um, guy, a guy that's really good to his people. The culture that he surrounds himself with seems to fit with what they want to do as well. Nobody wants to hire bad culture. Let's just be honest about that. Everybody wants to hire good culture, but sometimes you don't know what a culture will be. And with a guy like Brad Treliving, he's got a track record of very good culture and being a savvy guy. And let's face it, Ant, he was a guy that in the offseason, a lot of people talked about executive of the year after losing Gaudreau, finding out Kachuk was not going to extend there, and then doing the best he could with a shitty situation. Is Brad Treliving a name that's come up? Has there been any contact or interest with Brad Treliving?
I haven't heard Brad Treliving directly with the Flyers,
That means
but
he's
I
getting the job.
exactly. They're going to keep us all in the dark and then come over the top rope. But what we have to remember about Brad Treliving is he wasn't fired. He left of his own accord. They wanted to
Yep.
keep Brad Treliving, and I believe it was. I hope I get this right. I think it was Frank Saravalli who said this, but it was essentially a power struggle between him and Daryl Sutter, and Daryl Sutter won out. That the owners did not want to move on from Daryl Sutter, and I also know that there's other people in that hockey ops department who felt that Daryl Sutter, easy enough for me to say, should stay on. So Brad Treliving could have stayed on in Calgary if he wanted to. It was him
As soon as
deciding to
ownership
leave.
cuts your legs off, though, to make that move that you want to make, you're done. You got to get.
Yeah,
You got to
you're
leave.
already finished because then you're
Yeah, power's up.
compromising the chain of command. That's what
Yep.
you're doing. Because you're saying that the guy who's theoretically below the GM is getting the final say. So, I mean, it is unfortunate what happened there. Obviously, Don Maloney, now the president of Hockey Ops, he has a ton of experience. And you bring up the respect of Brad Treliving. It goes well beyond just Brad. Like his father, Jim Treliving, is very involved in Hockey Canada. Obviously, he's been a staple and a cornerstone of Canada's version of Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, and the
Mm-hmm.
owner of Boston Pizza. Not that that matters, but I mean, so he has a family lineage that's been involved in hockey. This is just speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. But he just screams Pittsburgh to me. I don't know why. Brad Treliving screams Pittsburgh. And the other part about this is that I don't know how many of these hockey guys, for lack of better terms, are interested in the Flyers president of hockey ops job, because I think everyone kind of knows that Danny Briere is the chosen guy. And, I
Yeah.
was speaking to someone before and we talked about Doug Wilson and Scott Mellenby, and two very well respected guys, but are they going to be the right type of candidate given what Comcast is looking for? Like, is Brad Treliving going to want to come in and work closely with Val Camillo and promoting the brand and focusing solely on the cap and not really having a say in hockey ops? Like that's a question I think that maybe needs to be asked. And that's where the fair criticism comes in, is, are the Flyers doing it the right way? Like, I've said
Mm-hmm.
for a while that maybe you should have just made Danny Briere the president of hockey ops and have him bring in a general manager. He was kind of groomed to do that role given his position with the Maine Mariners as the governor and the president of that franchise. So, I mean, there's a lot of fair criticism that I think that can be thrown Comcast way for the way that they've decided to do this, because it does kind of feel like you're limiting the amount of candidates that you're giving yourself because of the job description and how unconventional you're looking to presumably structure your organization.
Yeah, I agree. And how it all plays out remains to be seen. Is the structure that plateaued hierarchy, like I talked about, if it's somebody in the president role like Emily Constangay or Cami Granado or someone else in that way, or if it's Brad Treliving or Scott Mellenby, is it more hierarchical? That'll remain to be seen, because I agree. I think a guy like Mellenby is going to want to have influence. Certainly, it's the GM's decision, but have a good amount of influence on how the roster is built and stuff like that. Those are hockey guys that are not as interested in liaisoning with business exclusively. So I think
Yeah.
that's an important point that you bring up for sure.
And you bring up Cami Granado. Like, I think that she's already been interviewed. I think she was probably one of the
Are these
early
interviews in
ones.
person, by the way, or are these virtual?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Like, look,
Maybe
Comcast has
some.
kept this they've kept this very tight to the vest. I've had to go unconventional routes to figure out what's happening, but I mean, it's a fair question. Like, I mean, Cami Granado seems to check the boxes that they want. I mean, based on everything that it seems like they're looking for, it because I don't even think that they knew what they were looking for. Like, I think they brought in Glasberg and his committee, what was it, his agency, the coach's agency, and they brought in Billy King to try and really coach and guide Hilferty and Val and whoever else is involved in this into really trying to figure out what they want. So maybe they learned early on here from the people they brought in to help, like, okay, well, if Danny Briere is your guy to oversee hockey ops, maybe you're not going to be looking for a conventional guy to oversee hockey ops, like Jim Rutherford in Vancouver, or kind of Jeff Gorton in Montreal. Like, you're kind of looking for, like, maybe not a liaison, but like someone who's right in the middle of everything, like in the middle of Comcast, in the middle of hockey, and in the middle of Val Camillo on the business side with the Wells Fargo Center. Like, that kind of seems to be what their job description is. And if that's the case, like, does it make sense to bring in a Scott Mellenby or Doug Wilson or Brad Treliving?
Yeah, that's a good point. And where this all goes, if they're going to get in the second, kind of trim it down and focus on second interviews, then we could be, within a couple of weeks away of, getting resolution on this, because I don't think they should rush it. I don't think there is a rush right now. But, the next thing up for the Flyers is the NHL draft lottery in 13 days. That's the next element, right? By the way, I've been on this draft lottery simulator like a freaking maniac every day because I'm a freaking narcissist. And like today, I was hitting that thing, waiting to see how many times it took the Flyers to get to number one. I get to number two a couple times. It took me about 18, spins, if you will. The freaking today was. I'm glad the draft lottery is not today, because if it was, the Washington Capitals are winning it. But boy, they ended up with the top pick like 7 times, and they have a 6% chance. Flyers have 6.5. But geez, that is a nightmare scenario that kept showing up for me today. I'm glad, like I said, it's not today, but we'll see. Unbelievable. Let me get this thing up here from Ryan. Ryan's always messaging in, and sometimes his stuff doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Ryan says, if the Flyers, who are light years away, will build their team and eventually 7 years away become a team that plays the style of Carolina, just with better skaters, speed. Everybody's all yelling outside.
Scoring. I could hear it on my end.
Yeah. This notion that the Flyers are, as he said, light years away, 7, 8 years away. Nobody in the league, by the way, from where they currently sit, is 7 to 8 years away. The Anaheim Ducks below, they are not 7 to 8 years away. The only reason why they wouldn't be competitive for 7 to 8 years is by bad decision-making, drafting, and developing.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
I shut my door. You talk, go.
Okay, I'll steer the ship for now. I think that the Flyers, if they were to win one of the top 2 lotteries, one of the top 2 picks rather, there's a case to be made that they could squeak into the playoffs next year. Because if, like, obviously a lot of other things would have to break right. But if, let's say, 75% of the kids' development stays linear, and Atkinson and Couture come back and they are 70% of what they once was, and then you drop in Connor Bedard and he lives up to all the hype, are they not in the same stratosphere as the New York Islanders? Are they not in the same stratosphere as, let's say, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who just missed? Like, if you drop Connor Bedard on this team and a lot of other things stay equal, like, even if you're not banking on Couture and Atkinson to come back, forget those 2 guys. Just the same team that they came back this year, but they come back with Connor Bedard, and you presume that 7 to 3/4 of the kids' development stays linear, and the right kids, right? Like, I mean, if, let's say, Wade Allison's development,
York, yeah,
exactly. Frost, Tippett,
I have no fear about Kate's.
He's already there. He's already won but he was, like, you see, even analytically, he was in the top 1% in terms of defensive numbers. Like, the guy legitimately, you could have made a case for a Selke win or nomination at all, at very least. Like, you drop Connor Bedard on this team, and even if he's a point per game player and you get some more health, like Farabee comes back healthy and Konechny kind of stays on the tracks a bit, This team
And then he
could
had
be a
Carter
bubble
Gauthier
team.
the year after, and he, plays
Yeah.
decently. I'm not saying he
Yeah,
has to be
exactly.
an all-star or anything, but yeah.
If he comes in and he becomes Pierre-Luc Dubois, which a lot of people have drawn that comparison since he was drafted last year, you could be in business. Now, that's a big if. Winning the lottery is the most massive if of all time. You can make the case for. But it just goes to show that the Flyers aren't missing quantity. They're missing quality. And yes, it's not easier to go out and get that high-end talent, go get that quality. But if one piece of luck breaks their way in a week's time, I think, or 2 weeks' time,
13 days.
13 days, it could change a bunch of stuff for this franchise.
Yep. A timeline on a team can change very quickly. Like the Rangers sent out that letter. Now, the Rangers are in a different situation because the Rangers, when they stripped it down, they didn't totally strip it down. They didn't trade Mika Zibanejad. They didn't trade Chris Kreider. They didn't trade their goalie asset in Igor Shesterkin. They got Artemi Panarin, who wanted to go to one place, New York City. They got Adam Fox, who forced his way there. They traded for Trouba and extended them. They made some savvy moves, and they pivoted quickly. And, look at the New Jersey Devils. Now, the Flyers are not the Devils. The Devils last year finished with 63 points. Flyers finished with 61. Not this year, the year prior. The Devils this year were an absolute wagon, but they did have young players in Jack Hughes, and they made some very good moves. They signed Hamilton the year before, and, they already had Nico Hischier, so they're in a different situation. But this notion that it takes 7 or 8 years, I think is total, complete bullshit. Look at the Seattle Kraken. 2 years ago, they didn't have a fucking player or a coach. They hired Hack and Ron Francis. And what did everybody say at their expansion draft? What the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
Right? It was like, what are they trying to build? They're tied two games apiece with the Cup champs right now in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs in year 2. They didn't have a farm system, a pot to piss in, right? Yeah. And now they're in the playoffs. So this notion that any team is 7-8 years away, who's 7-8 years away? Buffalo is 12 years away because they haven't done it right. But that's not to say that they're 7-8 years away.
Yeah, well, I just think that look, it's been so bad here for so long. And the Flyers were chasing the wrong destination for a long time. And I think that was a massive issue, is that they were concentrating on the short fix, getting back into the playoffs, like just sneaking in, hoping best that could happen. But now they've changed course. And luckily for Danny Briere and the new regime that's going to come in, is that Chuck Fletcher didn't do that last summer. The worst thing that they could have done last summer is trading that first round pick to bring in Alex DeBrincat, or trading that first round pick to clear enough room for Johnny Gaudreau.
Yep, that would have been like, man. Oh man,
brutal.
That would have been fuck all those people that were going nuts about Gaudreau, and I got caught up in it too because I want to see the player. Like I want to watch 82 games with a dynamic player, but he's going to be turning 30 this summer. It's 71 points this year. That contract's not going to age well. Now it could if they end up with Bedard, and it could, exacerbate it. But anyway, I'm just getting frustrated already. Anonymous message in and says Billy King's track record in the NBA is not good. Ask Nets fans how they feel about it. Yeah, but how many GMs in the NBA do their fan base feel good about? The NBA is a stacked league where stars determine where they go. They got all the power in the world. All of it, right? You cannot compare the NBA. And I'm not saying Billy King was a great GM in the NBA. He had to, for his time here with the Sixers, he had to try and build a team around Allen Iverson, and nobody wanted to play with Iverson because he never gave up the ball, right?
So well, when was he in charge of the Sixers? Like early 2000s?
Yeah, it was basically him with Larry Brown, and then a little bit after Larry Brown left, and he had to try and build a team with, the 1 year in 01, they started out 42-14, and Theo Ratliff got hurt and they had to trade for Mutombo, but he had to build a team with guys that were defenders and unselfish players like Eric Snow and, those kind of guys. And George Lynch and Mutombo, like I said, eventually, and other guys. But it's a hard thing to do in the NBA when the players determine where they go with such regularity. They can opt out and force trades, and you saw what happened recently with the Nets. They trade for Ben Simmons, who's a donkey. Durant forces his way out. Harden forces his way out. That's a different league. What I will tell you is this, though, Anonymous. The dude is incredibly smart. And we're not asking him to build a roster for the Flyers. His firm's there to lend assistance on targeting candidates and focusing the interviews. That's what his firm's there to do. I believe Billy. I know Billy. So personally. So he's a guy that I do believe in. So we'll see where it all goes. I think this is going to be a fascinating time. But again, this notion that they're 7-8 years away. If they're 7-8 years away, then everybody should be fired again. Because the reason why Buffalo has missed isn't because they haven't had good opportunity to good players. They drafted number 1. They got Owen Power. They got Rasmus Dahlin. They drafted number 2. They got Jack Eichel. So if they can't build a fucking team around that, then that is not a team being 7-8 years away. That is organizational malpractice, which they practiced for a long time. I think they got it right now with Kevin Adams and Granato as the coach. The owners finally tucked away in Pagula. And I love him because he built that huge building up at Penn State, made my alma mater, put him on the map. But shit.
Yeah. No, honestly, I think Buffalo has gotten it right now. Finally, at long last. It only took them, 3 general managers and 7 head coaches. But no, look, we have to realize, the NHL is built on parity. That's what the NHL is designed to have massive turnover. It happens all the time. Look, Seattle gets in their second year of existence. St. Louis is now on the outside looking in. I'm just saying, there's a lot of turnover. And look, the Flyers don't deserve the benefit of the doubt right now, obviously, based on how they've operated. But this is a brand new regime in a lot of ways. Look, you still have some hangovers, like Barry Hanrahan's there, Brent Flair's still there. But, Alan McCauley's a relatively new guy in there. He's only been on the job for 13 months. Tom Minton, the same thing. Even if, I had one person said, I don't know what Chuck was doing by giving those random titles to Tom Minton and Alan McCauley. So, there is a valid point there. And then at the very top of the organization, there's a brand new guy running things in Dan Hilferty. So, you want to give some level of the benefit of the doubt just because it's new, I'll trust you until you lie to me, or innocent until proven guilty. That's the mentality I typically like to have. But I do understand that, look, Dan Briere's been in the organization, Flair's been in the organization, Minton, McCauley. I get it if you don't want to do that. But I do think that it's not like they're starting from nothing. It's not like Danny Briere's taking over from, the Flyers in 2014 and he has to redo everything. There's a lot of guys here that are going to be parts of the future, I think.
Let's talk about some players. Provorov and Sanheim, what's the latest there? Because we're expecting some attrition on the blue line.
Yeah, so Provorov, I think the secret's out that the Flyers will obviously entertain moving him, and that I think the player will welcome a deal. I do think it's important to remember here that the Flyers are not going to give him away, and they're comfortable keeping him. We saw how he was deployed under John Tortorella. He's Torts' guy. And if you save for, let's say, Nick Seeler, he was the only one not to end up in John Tortorella's doghouse at one point or another. He was consistently deployed as the number 1 across the board, and he eats a ton of those minutes. He's a gamer, all that. But given where the Flyers are at organizationally, I think that he's a player that could be best served to find a new home. I think that the template the Flyers are going to be looking for are the Matthias Ekholm and Jacob Chychrun deals. I think they want to get back into the first round. They want another first round pick because they like some guys, notably Sandin Pellikka, the right shot defenseman. He's a guy I think that they really like. And if you could get back into, let's say, that mid-teen range, maybe you get a shot at him. But I know someone with the Flyers told me the other day that they don't foresee him going past number 14. So Provorov is a guy, I want to say I think he's going to go, but I know that the Flyers are not going to entertain low balls for him. So they're comfortable bringing him back. So it's not a slam dunk. It's not like someone that they feel like they have to trade. They want to get value for him. And I think they're going to be looking at I know they're going to be looking at the Ekholm and Chychrun deals as a template. Sanheim, they view him in the same light as Provorov, player-wise. Obviously, personalities, that's a different thing. But in terms of how they're viewed as a player, your Sanheim's 1 year older. He could be part of the future and he could not. The contract is a big thing. Obviously, like Provorov's contract is much more attractive than Sanheim. 2 years left at 6.75 as opposed to 8 years at 6.25. But he is a guy that they would entertain moving as well. 100% they would entertain that. It would be about find the right fit. Like I don't think you're going to get a Chikrin or Ekholm returned for Provorov for Sanheim, but I could see like maybe if you're willing to take back a bad contract. And the other thing is that maybe you look at a team like Calgary, Mackenzie Weegar, a right shot guy. I think he's a bit older. I think his contract is kicking in right away, simultaneous with Sanheim. So I think that the Flyers will explore maybe.
He was the market comparable for Sanheim.
Yeah, I was told that literally Weegar's deal kind of helped the Flyers in a way because Sanheim was maybe looking for more. So I think they have the exact same contract. Weegar's a right shot, Sanheim's a left shot. Obviously, he played junior hockey in Calgary. So I would say it's more likely than not Sanheim gets traded, but I wouldn't be surprised if they find a taker in that regard.
Really, more likely than not on Sanheim. What about Kevin Hayes? The player in his exit interview seemed awfully, certain that he was going to be moved and said, I'll probably hear something around the draft.
Yeah, so look, I think our buddy Anthony Sanfilippo brought it up on Snow the Goalie that it seems like he's destined for Columbus in a lot of ways. I spoke to someone last night. They are going to revisit Columbus. It seems like that's the likely destination for Kevin Hayes. I know that the Flyers they don't want to retain more than 2.1. They feel firmly that if you make Kevin Hayes a $5 million player, that's a fair deal. But who knows if the other GM will feel the same way. Like I've heard that they want to do right by Kevin Hayes and they would be willing to retain up to 50% to facilitate a deal. I don't know if Danny Briere feels the same way because I had heard that under Chuck Fletcher's regime. So maybe Briere feels differently in terms of retaining, 50%. I think 30 to 35% is the sweet spot that would land him in that high fours, $5 million range.
There's an important question here too. Do you want to retain 50% so you get a greater return, or do you want to retain 30%, 2.1 million, and have the value not be in what the return is, but also the additional cap space?
Yeah, like that is a very good question. I get the sense that they rather just retain less and get less in return. That's what I think. I think I think their big priority is cleaning up a lot of the cap, and that goes up beyond Danny Briere and hockey ops. I think that goes as high as Comcast. So I think that with Kevin Hayes, he's the type of guy that they would be willing to, just take maybe pennies on the dollar is the right word, but less than what he's actually worth as a player to only retain 30% or whatever $2.1 million is, because I think they firmly. Yeah, that's what they want. They think that $5 million for Kevin Hayes is a fair value for other teams, but we'll see if I guess specifically Columbus feels the same way.
Yeah. Let's talk about Ryan Ellis of all people, because that we're all assuming it's career over. What's the latest on Ryan Ellis and his contract? He's not going to retire and forfeit the money. I think we know that.
Yeah. He's owed, I think, $22 million in real money. So he's not going to walk away from that, right? That's like
why would you?
16 times the amount that I'll ever make in my lifetime. You know what I mean? So he's not going to walk away. Still is a belief. I spoke to someone last night that he is never going to play again, but his contract is insured. It's an insured contract, so that's a very important detail. And they're going to try and move him. Now, this isn't a situation that they have to move him. Like last year, they're in no rush to move him. They could stash him on LTIR till the end of that contract. Like they're not going to be, looking. They're not pressed to move that money. They're not in a position where they need to move that cap space. And look, as soon as the season starts, you LTIR him and you get that money, but it doesn't accrue cap space. But I know that they are not going to pay to dump Ryan Ellis. It's not going to be a situation like Shane Gostisbehere or like what the Vegas Golden Knights did with Weber's contract by dumping him to Arizona. Now, there's one thing one comparison that I think is very fair, and that's the Weber and Dadonov trade last summer, where the Vegas Golden Knights took on Weber, stashed him on LTIR to get that immediate cap space. and the Habs took on Evgeny Dadonov. I think that's something that the Flyers will be looking to do. And I look at the Vancouver Canucks, like they're a team that really wants to liberate short-term cap space.
They
And
can do
I
it,
see
yeah.
like, exactly. So I look at that team and I say, could you swap Ryan Ellis for, let's say, Tyler Myers? Where, the Canucks take on Ellis, they stash him on LTIR, they liberate $6 million of cap space right away. The Flyers bring in Tyler Myers. Sorry, as my cats start fighting in the back. And then you have Tyler Myers, who's going to play for you for a season. You're not committed beyond this year, and maybe that guy can give you some value on the trade front and also help your team. He's a right shot defenseman who could play on your second pair.
Yeah, it's essentially just letting a team cut bait from a player that's going to play by being able to take a salary back and put it on the shelf immediately and not be dinged with it. It's an interesting scenario. We'll see how that part of it plays out. And that'd be interesting, to grab Tyler Myers and all you're giving up is LTIR guy in Ryan Ellis is never going to play again. What about Frost? What's his contract look like?
Well, Frost is a guy that they really feel like is part of the future now. They really do like the way he responded.
2-year, 1.6 per AAV?
Like they're preparing for it. That's a contract that they're preparing. Like, look, much of the Flyers brass, if not all of them, are over in Finland right now at the U18s. I was told last night that Danny Briere took the red eye out to get there for the medal round. So I think that that's something they're going to tackle when they get back to North America. It's more likely than not that it's going to be a bridge deal. That seems where it's heading. Chuck Fletcher really kind of went trigger happy a bit sometimes with avoiding the bridge deals. Sometimes it worked out, like in the case of Konecny and Provorov. And sometimes it was like, was that the right move to make? Let's say like a Joel Farabee where the verdict is still out. So I think it will be a bridge deal. Now, I don't think it's completely off the table that they would go long-term with him because I do think they feel that strongly about Morgan Frost being part of the future here. I do think they're really impressed with the way that he responded to adversity finally, but more likely than not, I think it's going to be a bridge deal. I just think the long-term contract part is important to put out there just to kind of show what kind of confidence the organization has in the player.
Yeah, that can make a big difference for the player as well, just mentally.
Yeah.
All right, man. I'm exhausted after this episode.
Dude, it's a news dump.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday. There's a lot there.
Yeah. Wow. Came over the top rope with that.
Yeah, you did. You emptied the clip today on the program, man. Good job.
No.
Check out Ann's stuff on thefourthperiod.com. Help following all the details there and on Twitter at @ADeMarco25. And we'll see where this all goes. We'll stay on top of it. So make sure you check in and we'll see where everything goes. And great stuff. Let's wrap it up there. That's episode 63 of Stick to Hockey Live. We'll be back next time. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. And we'll talk to you next time on Stick to Hockey Live.